tell a few words about myself just in the context of this conference. But before that, I would like to give the floor to First Deputy Director of the OSCE Office for Democratic Institutions and Human Rights, Kateryna Ryabiko. The floor is yours, please. This is my table.
Greetings to the entire audience. I'm actually extremely glad and happy to be here today and see everyone. And I see a lot of familiar faces. Alexander Matvichuk from Ukraine, Konstantin Egat, Yuri Gibladze, Harry Hummel. I see Mr. Karamuzhai as well here, and many representatives of the international organizations and the delegations to the OSCE. It's an extreme pleasure to be here and to greet all of you to this important event on behalf of the Office for Democratic Institutions and Human Rights. I'd like, if you allow me, I will be a little bit more formal than Harry, and to try and do my best to connect the past, the present, and the future, as the discussions today and also tomorrow and the day after tomorrow at the OSCE ODIHR conference will cover all of these aspects. We will talk about the past 3 decades, achievements and challenges in the human dimension, and we will also talk about the challenges of the present and how we can address them as we move forward to the future. Talking about the past, in 1991, when ODIHR opened its doors, it was also the year when the Moscow document was put into force, and Harry already mentioned that. This was the time of the profound changes and the transformations. There's a lot of hope in the air for democracy and human rights and the rule of law. And this is the document where participating states all agreed that the role of civil society is absolutely fundamental for the lasting peace and security. And this was a continuous formation of the comprehensive concept of the OSCE security. Civil society ever since became a fundamental pillar, not only at the OSCE at large, but specifically in ODIHR's mandate. Civil society, we call it a key interlocutor, a partner, advisor, and so many other roles that the civil society organizations are actually playing in our daily work as the OSCE autonomous institution. Last year, I think that it's not a secret, but I have to talk about the last year, actually the last 18 months, the months of the pandemic. They were really tough. And they were extremely tough for the civil society, as many states across the OSCE were taking measures and put into place derogations from certain human rights, affecting the activities of the civil society. ODIHR put analysis in place and put forward some recommendations in terms of the importance of securing certain functions of the civil society during the times of crisis and during the times of the pandemic in particular. And we continue to work in that vein, addressing the use of technology during the pandemic, and also in connection with the human rights and in connection with the protection of democracy, and putting a very strong emphasis on the role of civil society in these developments that for some were rather new, but from which today we already can learn the lessons as we are moving to the future. During the pandemic, this was not the only thing, the only aspect that ODIHR put the attention to. ODIHR has continued working on direct assistance to civil society and also working with civil society, expanding our partnerships. I just want to give you a couple of examples, and I also would like to recognize a number of ODIHR colleagues and experts who are here in the room and would be happy to continue and provide you more information about these activities. One very important element of our work during the pandemic was the development of a safe space for human rights defenders, the so-called Freedom Lab. And that also allowed to integrate and continue the dialogue among many participating states, among civil society in many participating states, where ODIHR is not present, and there was no possibility for ODIHR's presence, and there was no possibility for civil society also to have that safe space. So we've attempted to tackle that program, activity in connection with the developments that we've been observing in the use of technology, specifically affecting the possibility for the organizations, for civil society organizations to work effectively. And we hope that this resource will stay with us as we move to the future. In the area of democratization, ODIHR built the capacity of civil society on trial monitoring, which is an extremely important part of ODIHR's mandate. And we've also put together, having the limitations of the pandemic, we had to put together the video modules to make it accessible to all organizations across the OSCE participating states, and also to develop the online trial monitoring methodology that we hope you find useful. The office also focused on women human rights defenders and the challenges that they've been facing during the pandemic and beyond the pandemic, including through the advocacy for gender and politics. We've also been fully aware about the effect of the pandemic on marginalized and vulnerable groups, and here we worked on the online training opportunities in hate crime and prevention of hate crime, and specifically the monitoring of incidents of hate crime that particularly target the women human rights defenders. We've also maintained regular communication and cooperation with civil society organizations in the election-related activities and the deployment, including as part of the follow-up to our election observation missions. Well, but today it's not about ODIHR, it's about you, and it's about the successes and the challenges that you are facing in your daily operations. And here I really like to say thank you for being such an incredible resource to ODIHR in everything what we do, and in everything what we will be do to move the mandate in the human dimension forward. Civil society in particular contribute to the hate crime reports, and that especially in the past year uncovered manifestations of hate crimes on the variety of groups, and this was a new development, as unfortunately the number of these incidents have increased. And I specifically would like to thank you for being active in providing this information to ODIHR so that ODIHR can report on it and make the assistance to participating states more effective, working together on this aspect of the mandate. I also would like to say that we absolutely see that the pandemic has accelerated the continuous shrinking space of civil society across participating states. And ODIHR has been working and is seeking to counter this trend by making full use of its mandate. And the two areas in particular that we are working on, and they are particular of relevance to this conference, is the providing platforms for civil society to interact among itself, and also to interact with governments. And ODIHR will continue doing so. On the other hand, we're also assisting participating states in their responsibility to create a safer and more enabling environment where individuals can fully know and act upon their rights. And ODIHR will continue doing so and extremely committed to this aspect of our mandate. How we will do it? Well, there are many different instruments that we have at our possession. Some of them include legislation that facilitates the right to form and engage in associations and assistance to participating states and advising participating states. We will engage by monitoring the situation of human rights defenders and to develop targeted recommendations to strengthen their protection. And then we will continue to engage in the follow-up activities to the election monitoring missions. We will also continue to raise awareness of the compression to civil society space at the international level, and this is incredibly important. This will include coordination and partnership with other international organizations. And that's, that only will strengthen the voices and put forward the coordinated efforts from across the board of multilateral and bilateral organizations to make it more effective in support of civil society and the protection of human rights and promotion of democracy. Probably in concluding, I'd like to come back to the Moscow document of 1991, because it's been striking that it's precisely 30 years ago that this document was passed. And where participating states committed to protect human rights and fundamental freedoms during a state of public emergency, and reaffirmed that a similar situation shall not be used to subvert the democratic constitutional order. And in the last past decades, what we've been seeing, and especially I think that specifically been seeing in the past 18 months during the pandemic, that everything is interconnected and everything is interrelated. And both within our societies as well as across the countries, there are so many connections that in the situations of no crisis might not be visible. However, pandemic is only one element, and that probably became and put forward the problems that we haven't seen before, haven't been noticing before, just make them brighter, make them more visible, which also putting an enforcement on all of us to act upon these challenges. On the eve of the ODIHR's 30th anniversary as well, and I know that many of you will be attending the conference tomorrow and the day after tomorrow, we are looking back at these challenges. And we are also looking back at what we have achieved together. Because there are many achievements that could not be possible if this partnership between ODIHR and within the OSCE and civil society was not existent. And we will also be talking about the future. We will be looking into the future. And it's incredibly important, and it's incredibly clear now that the conversation about the past, the present, and the future, whatever the course this conversation will take, it will always have civil society as part of the solution. As part of the solution. And this is also, I think, is a key that was reflected in the Moscow document. And here I'd like to stop. I'd like to salute the work that the civil society organizations across the OSCE are doing. And maybe to end on an idealistic note, which, being an idealist, I strongly believe that one day we will reach that point. I do believe that only by working together, we will be able to support the creation of a more inclusive, diverse, democratic society and the human rights-aware world. So there is a lot of work to be done, and I'm looking forward to interacting with all of you and the Office of Democratic Institutions and Human Rights, looking for more cooperation with civil society on tackling these challenges and making this world better for all of us. Thank you.
Thanks, Evelyn. And without further ado, we have another greeting from Svetlana Tsikhanovskaya.